Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Monday, April 14th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 522 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. Today marks just 10 days away from the 2025 NFL Draft as we continue to get closer to finding out what Darren Muji, Aaron Glenn, and the rest of this new regime do on night number one, and of course day two and day three as well, as they continue to round out this roster, needing to fill many holes, as we've obviously talked about a lot on the show. Today, we're going to break down some more draft topics. Mason Graham, Jets scheduled a visit with him tomorrow. We'll discuss that, what that means, and the possibility of the Jets selecting Mason Graham at 7. And we'll also get into Rich Cimini, in an article written yesterday in his normal weekly Sunday article, labeled the 3 favorites he feels, talking to sources around the league, for the New York Jets to pick at number 7. So we'll break down those 3 players as well. Before we begin, though, we got to get into our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. If you want to get in on any of the sports betting action, check out BetUS and use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek. If you want the hottest tickets in sports or any of the best in entertainment, plays, concerts, shows, you name it, SeatGeek has it. Use code Bubs on Sports for $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek and get yourself out to some awesome events. And of course, our friends over at Huga House. If you want any of their new arrival hats and sweatshirts or original collections, check them out and use code Bubs for 15% off any purchase and get yourself some awesome Huga House swag. So here we go, episode 522. Thank you as always for tuning in. Another week is upon us. The last week that won't be draft week. Obviously, next week is the 2025 NFL Draft, just 10 days from now. And today we've got a couple different draft topics to discuss. We'll start here with the Mason Graham news, and then we'll get into what Rich Cimini said in his weekly Sunday article yesterday about the likelihood of the New York Jets picking 3 different players who he feels are the favorites at number 7. But we'll start with the Mason Graham stuff. This was earlier today from Ian Rappaport. He reported Michigan defensive lineman Mason Graham, one of this draft's elite prospects, is visiting the Jets tomorrow, source said. The Jets has spent a considerable amount of time with Graham, including formal interview at the Combine, dinner the night before his pro day, and now the top 30 visit. Mason Graham has kind of had an interesting path from a Jets perspective on where we started in like January and where we are now. You know, you recall right when the season ended, I even remember the first mock draft that I did, it felt like Mason Graham, Jets taking defensive lineman, was all very likely. And it felt like he was going to be one of the favorites and one of the top guys on the Jets board, one of the top players to look for if he was there at number 7. And then as you got into these last couple months, especially here recently, we've all kind of, as a Jet fan base, gotten to a consensus of it's probably going to be either Armand Membu or Tyler Warren. But you still feel like with Mason Graham, at least amongst the fan base, there's not that much talk around him anymore going to the Jets at 7. I think a lot of that is people speculating that he's just going to end up going to Jacksonville at number 5. There's a good chance he doesn't get past Jacksonville. But it feels like either way, all this time, the Jets are heavily interested in Mason Graham, and they have a strong level of interest. And Ian Rappaport reported it right there, right? They met with him at the combine before his pro day. They had dinner with him in a one-on-one environment, and now they're bringing him in on a top 30 visit, which is huge. You know, you only get so many top 30 visits. If you bring guys in on one of those visits to your own facility, that's a big deal. And Mason Graham now will get that opportunity. So this is now 3 separate meetings that the Jets have had with Mason Graham. And the point I'm just trying to make here right off the bat, before we get into some of the numbers and what he could potentially bring to the table, is it feels like from an outside perspective, it's Armand Membu, Tyler Warren for the Jets at number 7. But there's a very real possibility that depending on how this regime approaches number 7, if they truly are best player available, if they love Mason Graham, who feels like a Aaron Glenn guy, the way he plays and the way Aaron Glenn talks about his players and what he wants in his players, there might be more of a case here to be made for Mason Graham maybe being the favorite if he's there at 7 than what most of us really believe, which is Membu or Warren. But inside the Jets building, there's a strong case to maybe make with how many times they've spoken to Graham, now having him on a visit, that they might love him the most out of any of these guys. And that's also just kind of a common theme with all this, right? The Jets have flown under the radar. Everything that we thought the Jets might do this offseason, they really didn't do. You know, when we talked about potential free agents, all this stuff, they didn't. And now we talk about all these different prospects. Mason Graham kind of got pushed to the side. It didn't seem like it was going to happen. And now here we are. This might be more realistic than it's talked about, with Graham at 7 and the Jets taking him. Now, we talked about Graham a little bit, of course, a couple months ago when we did our mock draft, and we've touched upon him a little bit over the last couple months here as we've gotten closer to the draft, but he is 6'3.5", 296 pounds, junior out of Michigan. When you're looking at Mason Graham himself, this is arguably a top 5 prospect in this draft, right? You look at the guy at every position, not just defensive line. You've got your Abdul Carter, you've got a Travis Hunter. Mason Graham's in that same category of a talent that, in terms of every single position, top 5 talent. Mason Graham right in that conversation. You look at his numbers last year: 46 total tackles, 3.5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 9 quarterback hits, 20 quarterback hurries. Tackles, sacks, quarterback hits, and quarterback hurries were all career highs. He finished his 3 years at Michigan with 108 total tackles, 9 sacks, 18 tackles for loss, 17 quarterback hits, and 47 quarterback hurries. You look at some of the other PFF numbers, I think these really pop out. He's had over a 90 PFF grade in the last 2 years, 91.1 last year, which was the highest of his career. He had a 92.6 run defense grade and an 81.1 pass rush grade, all amongst the 90th percentile among defensive linemen in college football last year, with 300 plus snaps played. He had an 86.8 true pass set pass rush grade, 13.8% pass rush win rate, and a 12% run stop rate. When you watch Mason Graham, you look at the numbers, you watch him on tape, he's an elite talent. He's an elite prospect. That's why he's been in the mix of top 5 player in this entire draft. And you've kind of heard a lot about this draft of there's a lot of good starters, but maybe not as many blue chip guys. It feels like there's only a few blue chip players that are being projected to be that. Mason Graham's one of those guys. And Aaron Glenn, what he wants out of his players, when you hear him talk about his philosophy, Mason Graham fits the billing of an Aaron Glenn guy. He's got a quick get off, very athletic, physical, tough, can fight off double teams, make life miserable for a quarterback, be a threat in the interior. He just feels like a guy that Aaron Glenn would want. And I think it shows with how many times they've met with him, now meeting with him again. Now, I will say this. I like Mason Graham a lot as a prospect. Personally, I would prefer, and this is just me, I know we could debate about this all day long, I would prefer to go the offensive route and either go Membu or Warren at 7 than Mason Graham. That would just be me. And look, I can understand the debate of going best player available. Only time will tell to see how this regime plays it out. Some general managers love to go best player available. Some general managers like to fill out needs. There's a benefit and a downside to both, right? You can go best player available at every spot, but if you go best player available at every spot, you might not be filling out all of your needs. You might be getting multiple players at the same position if when you're up to pick, the BPA is the same position you had prior. That's the risk, but the reward is you're getting the best player at each pick. If they feel that's with Mason Graham, then you go and do that. I would just prefer to build around and fill some more holes on offense and then find your defensive lineman in what I believe is a pretty deep defensive line class on day 2, whether that's your second round pick, third round pick, you work a trade, however that plays out. We'll see how much movement the Jets actually make. Maybe there's a world too where if Graham does fall to the Jets, is there a situation where the Jets could there be a situation where the Jets trade back, stockpile more picks for a team that wants to move up for Graham? Because it feels like draft night is going to look something like Mason Graham probably goes to Jacksonville. But there is a world where if Jalen Walker goes to the Jaguars and Graham slides past Vegas, do you get a team like Chicago or a team like San Francisco, heck, even a team like Cincy, who maybe wants to move up and pick up a piece for their defensive line? All of those teams need help. And that will be interesting to see how much the Jets value moving back, picking up more assets, how they would like their options if they move back, and how much they value Mason Graham and how high he is on their board. So very interesting to see how it all plays out. But the Jets definitely seem very high in Mason Graham. I think they're a lot higher, and it's got to be brought into a lot more consideration than maybe the fan base and the media is giving enough attention to, if that makes sense. I think there's a real shot if we're looking at Mason Graham, Armand Membu, Tyler Warren all being there at 7. I think you have to think it's not much of a surprise, even though we haven't talked about it a ton. Wouldn't be much of a surprise to see the Jets take him. And I'll say this, Mason Graham would be the only guy in the first round I'd be willing to take from a defensive perspective. I'm not on board with taking a Jalen Walker. I'm not on board with taking a risk on a guy like a Shamar Stewart, even if you trade back. I would prefer go offense, fill out needs there. But if there was a guy, realistic option to actually maybe fall to 7, not talking about Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, who are not going to even get past the top 3 most likely, it would be Mason Graham. The biggest question with Mason Graham, I would throw this out there too. Lacks a little bit of height and arm size. And you do just question, can he fit in a 3-4? Is it a 4-3? How does that all play out? And he's very similar to Quinnen Williams. And while that is a good thing, you can also look at it from a negative perspective and say you would rather maybe somebody that complements more of what Quinnen doesn't do next to him as opposed to a guy that's very similar to Quinnen, where Quinnen's technically a 3 tech, but so is Graham. So would you have to slide Quinnen into a 1 tech? Things kind of get interesting. And do you want to do that much moving? And that's the risk you take of a best player available, is maybe he's not necessarily what you need, but look, he is the best player available. If you feel he's that generational elite blue chip talent, then you figure it out and you make it work. And that's what good coaching staff, that's what good front offices would do. Is that the Jets' approach? Is that what we're going to get out of this regime? Only time will tell. But interesting. Graham, over the next 10 days, watch out. I think he's a lot more realistic and a lot more of a possibility if he gets past Jacksonville than maybe some of us think. And this kind of goes back to a couple months ago where it felt like Mason Graham early on, and then you saw free agency goes, and it's been offense, offense, offense. But the Jets, their style all along, everything we've talked about the Jets doing, right? Working in silence. Everything that we've heard about the Jets, it's kind of been the opposite of what has actually happened. So we'll see. So that's the Mason Graham news. I also wanted to get into a couple other players here at number 7. So Rich Cimini yesterday, if you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out. I always say this, Cimini does an awesome job. Every Sunday posts an article just about the latest news and what he's hearing around the New York Jets. And yesterday in his Sunday news dump, He revealed after talking to league sources who he feels is the 3 most likely picks. Now, Mason Graham's not on here, but this was prior to the Mason Graham visit news. However, these were the 3 picks. So with the 7th pick, with 11 days to go, now, of course, 10 days before the draft, the top candidates for the Jets pick at number 7, according to conversations with league sources, Samini wrote, it's Will Campbell from LSU, Armand Membu from Missouri, and Tyler Warren from Penn State. Now, Membu and Warren, and I'll have an article out on this either today or tomorrow when it gets posted on making the case for Warren and Membu. So if you want to check that out, definitely go do so. Links in the description. And I broke down many numbers, some film stuff from what I see on those 2 guys and why the case can be made for both those guys to fit with the Jets, Membu and Warren. We've talked about Membu and Tyler Warren a ton. That's not a surprise that they are on that list of 3 players. Out of the 3, 2 of them are on there to be the most likely to be selected by the Jets. The one sort of surprise was Will Campbell, because it feels like if the Jets are going to go offensive line, and in my opinion, if the Jets are going to go offensive line at 7, I'm taking Armand Membu. I'm not going Will Campbell. I like Membu more than Campbell. I think Membu fits more of what the Jets need than Campbell. There's just a little too many questions with Will Campbell. Do I think Campbell can be a good fit for a team like San Francisco? Do I think he could be a good fit for maybe a team like Miami? Sure. At 11 or pick 13. But what the Jets are looking for at right tackle and some of the concerns about Will Campbell's game, I don't love the idea of New York taking him, in my opinion. You even want to go with a possibility maybe him going to New England as well. I think that's probably a better fit. And the reason I say that is there's some concerns about Will Campbell and his shorter arms, hands, and wingspan. And it's a big concern because there's a lot of questions when you watch the tape and you hear from scouts across the league. A lot of teams, and it feels like a feeling that's continuing to build up, is that Campbell's eventually going to turn into a guard. And in my opinion, I'm not taking a guard at number 7, number 1, but the Jets right now, they need a right tackle. If you're telling me you're going to take Will Campbell and they're going to start to train him at guard, you still have a hole at right tackle. And I just don't love that. And even if you bring him in as a tackle, you've got to cross-train him now to play right tackle because he's played left tackle his entire career. And there is some good things Will Campbell does, right? Standing at 6'6", 319 junior. He started all 38 games in 3 years at LSU. He was a former 4-star recruit. He posted a 72.2 Pro Football Focus grade last year, an 80.6 pass blocking grade, 69.7 run blocking grade, which was all above average, well above average. He was near the 80th percentile from a pass blocking perspective. He was one of the better offensive linemen and is one of the better offensive linemen in this draft. I just think what the Jets are looking for, you need that right tackle, that surefire day one can step in, do your job at a position of need, and that's Armand Membu. Will Campbell, you just don't get that same feeling. There's a chance this guy isn't even a tackle in the NFL, which would mean you'd have to move him to guard. And you could say, oh, well, if the Jets have both of their guards next year hitting the open market. Okay, what are you going to do at right tackle? What's your move at right tackle? You're going to take Campbell and then go Campbell, turn him into a guard for the future if you can't retain AVT or Simpson, and you're going to go draft a right tackle like an Ozzie Trapilo, and you're going to blow 2 picks in the first 3 rounds on offensive linemen. Like that just, I don't know. I don't love it. I don't love it. And I don't think it's going to happen, to be honest. I don't. I would be pretty surprised if Will Campbell's a Jet. I think Membu's the better offensive lineman too, and he fills the need better than Campbell. Now, some things that Will Campbell does do well. He has high IQ, good technique, toughness, high floor, athletic. I think that is something that is intriguing. He's got a very high floor. You watch the way he plays. He's got a low bust potential. I especially think, too, if you eventually do move him at guard, he can be a very productive player. Tackle, probably a little bit of a higher risk, but a higher reward, and you find your franchise piece. Just the size, he's in the bottom percentile in arms, hands, and wingspan. And you have questions about how that can go over to the NFL. So I don't love the possibility of Campbell. I think if you're at number 7 and Campbell, Membu, Warren, Graham are all there, to me, Campbell would probably be at the bottom. Throw Tet McMillan in there. I think I wouldn't be I wouldn't be angry, but I would be pretty disappointed if they took Will Campbell over an Armand Membu or over a Tyler Warren. Because I think number one, there's better players in front of him. I think Membu's just a better player. He also fits the need. You don't want Campbell to come in here, not be able to play tackle, move in the guard, and you still have a hole at right tackle. In my opinion, you're the Jets. Just find a right tackle, guy who played right tackle in college. Membu fits that billing. Put him in. 5 starters. Boom. Lock him up. You feel great about the offensive line. Coming off of last year where 4 of the 5 starters, 27 or younger. That's what I would do. And we've talked about Warren and Membu a ton. I don't think that's a surprise in the Rich Cimini article there that they are both favorites. Do you want to go Membu, solidify the offensive line, and choose your favorite day 2 tight end, Terrence Ferguson, Mason Taylor, Harold Fannin Jr., whatever, Gunnar Helm? Or do you go Tyler Warren and then choose an Ozzie Trapilo, Jonas Sivania we've talked about? There's a handful of guys that play right tackle, can step in, compete day 2, and you go tight end day 1. And I think that could be the ultimate factor is which class, what do the Jets feel more confident in? Do they feel more confident in their ability to take Membu and find a tight end in the middle rounds, or do they feel more confident in their ability, more confident in this class to take Warren and then find a tackle in the middle rounds? That'll ultimately be decided here in 10 days. But you want the pass catcher. You want an option for Justin Fields where he's thrown to tight ends a ton in his career. He utilizes the tight ends a ton. Then that's Warren. You want solidify the offensive line for a run-first offense, get Fields some more pressure. You're on the Membu train.